are on.
Okay, terrific. Well, welcome everyone. I was just chatting with Nove, talking about the importance of having a two-way conversation today. I have prepared to do a demo. I've prepared slides to share with you, but please feel free to ask questions, to interrupt me, and also to provide constructive feedback, because that's the kind of feedback that helps us the most. And even though we've had this product in the market for about a year now, we still have a long way to go, and we recognize that. So just wanted to make sure everybody feels super comfortable with, just having an organic conversation. This does not need to be me on the stage explaining what we're doing, because the most important part is, I think, the interaction. So hopefully everybody's good with that.
Great. And if you don't mind, Carolyn, let me just interject very quickly to say to anybody in the audience that will be at HR Tech next week. Humaxa and Carolyn both come together. We'll be at booth 428E in the startup area. And I'm sure she'd love to see you and introduce yourself and say, I'm the one that asked all these questions other than Nove. So, but anyway, we're looking forward to it. So go back to it. Thank you.
Okay, terrific. And hopefully you all can see me on the webcam. My name is Carolyn Pierre, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Humaxa. And I always like to start with the video camera on so you can see I'm actually a real person, and just wanted to, say hello. But I think what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and shut off the video camera for now, just because it will make things run a lot smoother. I think it's less distracting as well once we kind of get into the talk of it. And then I can turn it back on at the end as well. So hopefully that sounds okay with everyone. I will do that now. All right. Well, welcome everyone today. I'm so grateful that I've had a chance to meet Nove and to have a chance to talk with you all. As I'm sure you probably already know, we are really trying to go about creating something that's very innovative. And it all starts with this idea that the world has changed and employees are not loyal like they used to be. Their expectations are different. They expect to work flexibly and remotely and move jobs frequently. So we wanted to really dig in and say, what's going to make people stay, engage, and perform? Of course, as I'm sure you all know, this can be a huge problem. Burson by Deloitte said that this cost organizations $160 billion in the US during the year 2017. So we know this is a big problem. And of course, it's a big problem. So there are a ton of employee retention tools on the market today. We contend that those tools don't work. They depend on surveys. And I don't know about you all, but when I used to work at ADP, I was a person who administered these employee engagement surveys to our own teams. And my employees would come back and say, hey, Carolyn, do we really have to take this? Can we just put all 5s? Because we don't want to have to do a bunch of extra work and nothing really happens anyway. And we don't want to have to do a bunch of work when nothing ever really happens. And I kind of understood where they were coming from. When I was working at ADP, the results that we would be waiting for often would take weeks and weeks. I would have to beg my employees to go take the surveys. Can you please take the surveys? Can you please take them? And we're at 80%, and we'd make an extension, and a few more people would be able to take the surveys. And then finally we'd have the cutoff date, and then it would take another few weeks to get the results back and crunch all the numbers. And then we would have meetings about the results themselves. And then we would have meetings about how we would position the engagement survey results to our teams. And then we'd have the meetings to actually present the results to our teams. And then we'd have more meetings to talk about what action plans we wanted to take. All of this would take weeks and weeks and weeks. None of it was automated. There was nothing about the employee engagement, employee retention, or the employee performance processes that was automated. It was all on us. So based on my 17 years of experience in the HR tech industry, I left ADP in 2017 with two colleagues, and we founded this company to replace these broken tools that exist today. We said, why not engage workers with a fun, meaningful, useful chatbot assistant? Let's make retention and performance mindlessly easy, and let's take 8+ weeks of work and turn it into 8 seconds. It's as simple as just clicking start. There's no waiting for data, no waiting for reports, absolutely no obligatory meetings, and no laborious action plans. The system is automated, which frees up all this time for people leaders, for HR leaders to focus in on where they're going to get the most bang for the buck. They don't have to go and look at endless amounts of data, endless amounts of reports. It's going to come right to them, right in the flow of work. So I have an example I'd like to show you. This is an example of our chatbot assistant having a conversation with an employee who's feeling stressed out. They're feeling stressed out at work because they work remotely. Maybe they're being asked to take on some new responsibilities. They're not sure who to go to or who to talk to, and they're just feeling really stressed out. So let's see how this would play out. Bear with me. So starting in the upper left-hand corner, the chatbot assistant, who's affectionately named DevFred, is reaching out and saying, hey, Carolyn, how are you doing? Here are some of the things I can do for you right now. You can provide workplace feedback. You can nominate a person of the day. You can join a group discussion. You can request a mentoring activity or provide or request coworker feedback or change the message frequency. In this case, because I'm playing the role of a stressed out employee, I want to give feedback about stress. And the chatbot recognizes that and says, oh, yeah, I'm sure you know, like everyone, that work can be very stressful at times. That's true for bots too. Well, just kidding. But all jokes aside, how do you feel about the space and the resources given to you to manage your stress at work? And I've now responded to the chatbot and said, you know what? I feel terrible. I always feel stressed out. I don't feel like I have anyone to talk to about it. So the chatbot recognizes this and tries to dig in a little deeper and figure out kind of the root cause of what's causing the stress. You know, is it inability to relieve stress, or is it about your workload? Is it about your coworkers or maybe your managers? And I tell it, no, it's really about, I just don't know how to relieve stress. I don't have good coping mechanisms. And he responds and says, oh, I understand. How about joining a group discussion with your coworkers to talk about your interests? And I say, okay, hey, that sounds pretty good. And it's making some suggestions. Maybe you want to get together with your coworkers and talk about health and wellness, for example. That sounds pretty good. So I accept to participate in the group discussion. And now the chatbot itself is going to place me and introduce me to the rest of the group that is interested in talking about health and wellness, maybe also stress mitigation, and is going to put us all into a chat room together, and we can take it from there. So maybe we end up having a virtual meditation session, or maybe we decide we're going to discuss how other people are able to mitigate stress. Could go a whole bunch of different directions. When it comes right down to it, it's about people helping people through technology. So this is just one example. So we're hearing music. Maybe you can put yourself on mute if you've got music playing.
Yeah. Carolyn, this is Nov, and yeah, you will, as this group knows, I tend to ask a lot of dumb questions, but let me start that process early. So I'm looking at this example, and certainly this, health and welfare or wellness is a very hot topic. Does your community of users, or is it your anticipation of a community of users to start providing you as the developer the opportunity to see what kind of things are happening? In other words, this wellness program, but somebody may have mindfulness training videos or something. And so I see this community is maybe banding together to providing more wealth and depth in the product. You're providing the platform for the interaction, but
Right.
the solutions could be all over the board, and it becomes, to me, an exceedingly rich arena if your users are really helping to bring that all together. So I'd love to hear your comment on that one. Where are you going with that one?
Sure, absolutely. I'm so glad you asked, Joe. So as we've started, there's a number of different solutions that the chatbot assistant will try to arrange different activities, but our vision for the future is to have an open platform to make our APIs public and to be able to offer up hundreds of different kinds of solutions, all in this space, in the HR technology space. So it could be anything from training to health and wellness programs to an employee assistance program, or it could be something as simple as, I feel like I spend too much time commuting to work. How about Uber Pool? How about, being able to commute to work? We envision this chatbot assistant being able to really get to the heart of what's working and not working for each individual person and for an entire organization, and make recommendations from a broad array, a broad group of topics and a broad group of solutions that's out there that we didn't necessarily create ourselves. Does it make sense?
Absolutely. And we'll explore that a little bit later, I think, when we get down to it. So anyone else have any questions at this juncture? If not, we'll just keep on going.
Okay. Yeah, another thing I was just going to highlight here is, based on the results that we're seeing so far, the more sensitive the topic is that people are providing feedback on, the more likely they are to engage with an anonymous chatbot than they are with filling out a survey or going to their manager or someone else, a coworker. And we believe that's because, it could be a little bit because of the personality of the chatbot itself. It's very disarming. If you look in the upper right corner where he talks about, hey, he's acknowledging work is stressful. It's not that you can eliminate stress at work completely, but it's important to have the space and the resources to mitigate that stress. And, his kind of sort of funny personality what we're seeing is it has a tendency to get employees to kind of open up and be very authentic with the feedback that they're giving, versus just answering a question on a scale from 1 to 5. How do you feel about this? Which isn't necessarily that authentic about the feedback. But then, of course, probably the greater reason is it's not just asking for feedback that benefits the organization. It's also trying to figure out the root of the problem and trying to come up with some kind of solution for the employee in that moment when they have the feedback. So it gets around the whole problem of feeling like, well, what's in it for me? Why should I spend a bunch of time providing this very authentic feedback when it just sort of goes off into the ether and it doesn't seem like anything really happens as a result of that? So based on that, what we're seeing is about 25 to 50% greater engagement with this sort of fun interactive chatbot that takes action than with any kind of a survey that's out there today.
Hey, I have a question. Hi, this is Roy Altman. My question is, how deep is the AI? I mean, suppose the answer was something like, this is a toxic environment, really gets to something, very weighty, that the chatbot can't, like, just recommend a fitness program or something. I mean,
right.
Get into the semantics, or just really serving up a menu of available mitigations?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So it does evaluate not just sentiment, but how strong the sentiment is. And I think when I show you kind of what it looks like on the back end, you can see that. But based on the gravity of the situation, there definitely are limitations of how deep the AI goes. So, it will try to do the best it can, and it does filter the feedback based on strength. If someone writes in about, let's make up a topic, I don't know, diversity and inclusion. And if someone writes in and says, we do a terrible job of this, it's a really bad situation, we need to do something right away, it will recognize that that's a big problem compared with someone else who maybe said, we do pretty well, or, maybe we should have some more programs or something. It will filter that up to the top and flag it. But it doesn't go, there's only so many solutions that it can provide at the present time. We hope to build it, so that it gets even more deep into the actual solutions. But it's a work in progress.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. What other thoughts or questions do you guys have so far?
So when you say, this is Paul, so when you say it's flagged, then it's flagged for whose vision? I sent a question to Noah, but I'll ask it real time.
Okay.
What happens if it's of a serious nature? Let's say someone says, I'm really stressed, I'm having suicidal tendencies. Does the chat alert someone? Because I'm always thinking about confidentiality, but you also want to raise it to someone's attention if someone's that desperate.
Right. It's a good question, and you kind of have to straddle this, respecting people's privacy, but also being able to take action when there's a serious problem going on. So I can show you what that kind of looks like on the back end, but ultimately it's up to the individual whether they want to identify themselves or not. And if they choose to not identify themselves, the administrator of the system can see the feedback, know that it's a big problem, and know what group that person is a part of, but it doesn't identify the person unless they choose to be identified.
So let's say that it's a passive cry for help. Can the administrator reach out to the individual, not knowing who it is, but send them a message and says, hey, if you need help, we have an EAP program or whatever. Can they make contact with that individual?
Yeah, it's a good question. So right now, all you can really do is see what group that person is in, and my recommendation in that case would be to make that case with the entire group and let them know about these resources without identifying why it's coming up as a problem. Offer up, resources and help and someone to talk to, all those things. But the way the system is set up today, if the person does not want to be identified, there's really no way to go back and figure out who said it exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Although I would love to hear if you feel, or if people feel that, under certain circumstances, it's acceptable to break that sort of contract of confidentiality. I mean, you want people to trust the system and to be able to give frank and honest feedback, right? And to give people the opportunity to choose whether to keep the feedback private or not. One thing that we could consider, it would actually be very easy to do, would be to look for keywords like, suicide or take my life, or I don't know, some sort of keyword search that would, maybe be a reason to have to break that confidentiality contract. I don't know. What do you guys? Is anyone willing to share kind of what they think about that? What do you guys think?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I would imagine it's the same kind of confidentiality as if you go to a psychiatrist or something and you say, I'm considering committing a mass murder or abusing my child or something.
Yeah.
I think you're speaking to probably the toughest area right now. The more we see of automation, the AI becoming more and more important in terms of amassing data, looking at trends and so on. The idea of privacy, and I don't want to get into the discussion per se, but I would say that it's probably the thing that many HR folks are facing as, I need the data to help you the best way possible. And it's not just in this instance, but many other ways. I'm going to be transparent and tell you I'm going to collect it, but I'm going to protect it. Many of the vendors today will help, they will hold the data as a vendor, and maybe you would consider this, saying, if there are certain areas where there's a real serious problem, maybe you need a third-party intervention and not the employer, but maybe someone else. And maybe that's offered as a resource from you as the vendor. If I see keywords like suicide or mass murder or whatever, I just bought a gun, whatever it is, that you intervene with a third party without jeopardizing the confidentiality, but you are taking that person, you know who they are, you know where it came from. You as the vendor do know these things, correct? You know exactly who it is, right?
Well, it's, so there's an identifier in the database that ties to each individual person that it's like a key, right? It's the key in the database. But there's nothing in the application that ties that key to a person unless they choose to do it. Now, if you do a query, a behind the scenes query of the database, I actually would need to check and see. I believe there is a way to tie it. If you do, it's not in the application, it's not in the GUI, there's no way for us to do that within the application, but to query the database, I think there may be a way to tie that together.
Yeah, and I think, I don't want to expound on this one because this becomes a whole other topic, but quite literally as a vendor, I've seen many vendors say, we can tell you who the person is, we just hold that back because we don't want to break that privacy between employer and employee. But since we have that ability, in this particular case, maybe you can provide a third party. Maybe you can offer a phone number and say, would you like me to place a call to somebody you can speak to? Where there's not breaking the privacy, but it's still meeting the needs. And so that's where the problem, I think, would be. And maybe it's up to the CHROs or the CEOs or even, maybe the internal counsel saying, yeah, we do want to do that. We want you to do that for us. We feel it's serious enough, or we prefer not to. It becomes an option for your clients. So
yes.
Enough said.
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point, which is even today, there are internal links that our clients want to link out to that they have that's very proprietary. It's just something that they have. And for example, if they're, an LMS is a perfect example. If they have an LMS, someone's saying, hey, I really am not getting the professional development that I'm looking for. Hey, Alfred, can you help me? Then the chatbot can link out directly to that organization's LMS. That's something that we can do today very easily because it's simply a link. So that doesn't go into privacy issues at all, but the actual linking out like an EAP system would actually be very easy to do because it would just be a link and that's it. But I think the bigger question is, what do we do about if there's something seriously concerning, then do we break that privacy contract in order to prevent something awful from happening? Yeah.
Sounds like phase 2.
Yeah, exactly.
Go for it.
All righty. Any other thoughts or questions before we move on? Okay. We'll just go ahead and move on. So obviously, we're more than just a chatbot. On the administrative side of the application, you can control what kinds of questions the chatbot asks, what types of topic he brings up, what kind of actions he suggests. You can turn off topics. You can add your own topics. You can turn off what kinds of questions he asked about. I was talking with a client a few weeks ago, and they were in the process of revamping their benefit offerings. And they did not want the chatbot to ask anything about benefits because they knew everybody hated the benefits. They didn't like the benefits that they were being offered, and so they were in the middle of revamping it. They didn't want to, kind of rub salt in the wounds of this employee base that already knew there was a problem. So we just simply turned it off. It's super easy to do. I can show you how to do that later on. and then adding in topics. So this is another real life example. I was speaking with an organization that has a bunch of industrial engineers who had primarily been hired because they were good with their hands. They were good with fixing things on the production line. But the way the world has changed, now a lot of times on these production lines, there's a lot of IoT devices, sensors that exist on the production line, sensors that tell you when equipment needs to be maintained or tell you when there's some sort of inefficiency happening. And so this group of employees that was hired for something completely different was now being asked to learn how to program these IoT devices. So their jobs were changing, and they were changing substantially. So in this case, the client wanted to put a bunch of they wanted the chatbot to ask a bunch of questions about, hey, how do you feel about how your jobs are changing? How do you feel about the training that you're offered to program these new IoT devices? How how do you feel about the work duties? And then same thing with the kind of topics that the chatbot would reach out and suggest, like, hey, how do you feel about these new sensors? And if people wanted to get together and share best practices, especially the early adopters, the ones who have really figured out, oh yeah, it's not that hard to program these sensors. Let me show you guys how to do it. The chatbot assistant could put everybody together and create kind of a knowledge share activity where you probably have a wide breadth of people. Some are early adopters, some are really scared and wanted to keep their jobs just as they were, but having everybody grouped together and having maybe some of the early adopters help out some of the other people who are slower to adopt this new technology and figure out how to program these IoT devices could make a big difference in retaining them, to helping them be the best that they could be on the job, given that they were hired for something completely different. So just an example of how how it's possible to customize the product itself. Requires.
So Carolyn, I keep coming up with these doggone questions. Did somebody have a question? I'm sorry, go ahead. No? So you bring up a point that makes it interesting that says, why wouldn't I want to identify myself if I could be perhaps rewarded as an early adopter of a particular new process or machinery? Again, it's going to be dependent upon the employer to do something favorable for that individual. But this idea of idea sharing, mentoring almost on the spot with people who are willing to do that, I think those are the kind of things that really change the organizational culture without anybody having to do a whole lot more except talking to a bot and connecting things and people. And I think that's a pretty important perspective, if you will, a change. So again, not being a practitioner, I always ask the audience, the HR practitioners out there, what do you really think about that? Is that really along the lines of what people could be doing in just launching, mini mentoring programs and reskilling and so on, and rewarding people for identifying and becoming part of that change?
Well, I think surveys are most effective when they can be trusted to be anonymous. I think once you know that your employer is seeing what you're saying, it changes what you say. So
yeah, you bring up a good point.
The default should be anonymous unless you volunteer to disclose your identity.
Can I ask,
that is true.
This is Amanda, and I wanted to ask a question about that. What's the push and pull? How do you get employees to actually participate? Is this mobile and they can just on the fly give responses? What motivates them to even get involved here?
Yeah, it's a great question. And just to go back, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the name of the gentleman who spoke just before you, Amanda, but yes, the default is always anonymous. The person has to actually go and say, show my name, in order to make it not anonymous. And I can show you guys that when we get into more of the demo. But Amanda, to your question, so right now, what we're seeing, I think I mentioned this, but we're seeing about 25 to 50% greater engagement with the chatbot assistant than with any kind of survey that's out there. And our feeling is the reason for it, the motivation for it, is because it tries to take action based on what people say. So it's not just gathering information that benefits the organization. It's a kind of a two-way, it's attacking whatever the issue is from two directions. From one direction is the employee itself. It's trying to enable the employee to help to solve their own problems, either on their own or with other people who are willing to help. And then from the employer side, it's providing this very detailed data, giving administrators a heads up. Hey, pay attention to this. The data is trending badly. It's going the wrong direction. And it will, and again, I think I can show you that a little bit better in the application itself, but it will tell you exactly where to go look and dig in. And to, in some cases, if the person has chosen to put their name down, it allows you to reach out directly from the application itself to them.
Carolyn,
hi, this is Bruce.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Bruce.
How did you measure that engagement increase? And did you say it was 25 to 50%?
Yes.
And how did you measure that?
So we looked at what the average response rates were for any type of employee engagement survey that's out there today, and looked at the data and compared that to the data that we're seeing with the organizations that are using our software. And that's the delta between the engagement rates for people that are using ours versus surveys. The average.
Okay, and okay, so this is at the company level. So when you talked about some of those access to resources, you're not looking to a broad kind of ecosystem of companies. This is all company specific. So if I'm looking for resources, I'm going to find the ones that are quote unquote within my organization. Is that right?
That is today. That is correct. Yes.
And is your vision to do more broadly than that, or because I could see some real power in that, if assuming you could sell it to an organization and have them be okay with it.
Yes, I do think that was kind of where our future lies. As I mentioned before, our vision is to open the platform up and offer all types of different solutions, because I feel like where we bring the most value is in creating this bridge between what people need and want to engage and perform, and then the solutions that are out there today. Does it help?
Thanks. Yep.
Okay, great.
So Carolyn, I was going to make a suggestion. I don't want to disturb the audience's perspective or your presentation, but you've mentioned the back end. And I suspect that maybe some of the questions that are being asked or the thought process might be served by showing us a little bit about the back end, the administrative. Because I think that's the guts of what it is. I mean, certainly, I think we're seeing that front end, and I think we've got that fairly well understood. I think I personally would love to see the back end.
Sure.
But I'll leave that to the crowd out there. Anyone object to go that route? If not, let's just go do it.
Okay, sure.
Thanks.
I'll just real quickly, just our initial group of client users have been very positive about what we're doing. They've given us some great feedback, and their employees themselves are finding out all sorts of new things that they didn't know about their coworkers. And as I mentioned before, one of the things that I think sets Humaxa apart from any other employee retention chatbot or any other solution focused on employee retention is just because of the experience that we had. You know, myself, 17 years of experience in the industry. My two co-founders, Guillermo and Gary, are very technical, natural language processing background and so forth. I think that it's not that we're particularly brilliant, but the fact that we sit at this intersection of having deep domain knowledge and then also the technical expertise to do that. So let me go ahead to your point, Nov. I will switch over to doing a live demo, if everyone's okay with that.
I think so.
Okay. So just very briefly, what you are seeing today is the live system. Can everyone see my screen still? Is it still showing the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, we're there.
Okay. So this is the live system itself. And as Nov, as you alluded to, there's two sides of the application. There's how the employee interacts with the system, and then how the administrator can look and see the data and the suggested activities, the recommendations, the heads up, the red flags, all those kinds of things. So what I thought I would do is just show you real quickly how this would work for the employee. So I can say, hi, Fred. I can reach out. Now, typically, this is a little bit contrived because we're in a live demo. Normally, the chatbot itself would reach out to people every few days, maybe every 5 days. I think it's set to about 5 days, and the person can control that very easily. And it will spontaneously ask people if they have feedback, or if they would like to be a mentor to somebody else, or if they'd like to join a discussion, or it will periodically ask people to engage. And remind them and sort of, offer to take action for them. But because we're live here today, we're just kind of speed up the process. And of course, an employee can reach out to the chatbot whenever they want. So many different things they can do. They can provide workplace feedback. You've seen this. I'm just going to choose Be Onboarded again so that you can see what this looks like the very first time somebody interacts with the chatbot itself. It will say, hey, Carolyn, I'm Alfred, a workplace community builder. I'm here to make work feel as fulfilling, engaging, and meaningful as possible. I would like to ask you a few questions so I can get to know you better. First, in no particular order, which 3 of the following topics are you most interested in? So then, let's say I'm really interested in public speaking. Let's say I'm interested in human resources. There we go. And then if everything is enabled, I can also choose maybe something that is not work related, or maybe I want to get better at data science or something. These are just things that I'm interested in. So it's just kind of a first kind of hello, what do you like? What are you interested in? And then the next thing the final thing that it does in its first interaction is making sure to not contact people when they don't want to be contacted. So it says, please select how often I should be allowed to talk to you. And this was really important thing that we learned very early on, is make sure you have that option there right away. So of course, you can choose anytime, or you can set limits, the last of which is never. And what we're seeing is a small percentage of the employee population will just say never. And if you choose never, then the chatbot will get a little bit upset. He'll cry a little bit here. It says, okay, I will never contact you again. But you can also change that at any time. And that's another thing that we're seeing with our user base, is sometimes people will say never, and then they'll hear from their coworkers about something interesting going on, a discussion topic, or an event that they're planning or something, and they'll say, how did you find out about that? Or how did you get invited? They say, oh, well, that friend invited me, the chatbot invited me. And then what we're seeing is there's another percentage of those people who then go back and change how often they want to be contacted. Of course, they can always contact the chatbot themselves. So let's say that I want to give feedback about the professional development that I'm receiving. So I would like to provide workplace feedback, and I don't have to wait for a survey to show up. I can give feedback right at the moment when I really am feeling strongly about it. And I will say, of course, there's many different areas where I can provide feedback. In this case, I'm going to choose professional development. And he responds, bots have lots of options to grow professionally. I've always looked up to those popular bots that work for those big tech companies for professional growth. But what about you? Do you feel that you get the professional development that you're looking for? I'm going to make something up here. I'm just going to say, no, I don't. I'm unhappy about my options. So this is the question. I think it was Amanda, if I remember correctly, who had asked about keeping it anonymous. So right here, it's going to default to keep it anonymous, but I can also choose show my name. In this case, I'm going to show my name because I don't mind. And then I hit submit to give the feedback. So the chatbot recognizes that I'm not very happy about my professional development options and says, hey, I could try to arrange a mentoring activity so that you could get some of the professional development that you're looking for. What do you say? So I'm going to say accept. And he says, okay, you want to be mentored? I'm going to go set things up. Awesome. Just select a topic from the list and type something about what you're interested in or that you would like to learn more about. So here are some different options that other people have said they already have volunteered to mentor people in. So maybe I want to get better at JavaScript. If I didn't like any of the topics, I could have just typed one in also. Hit submit. Thank you for applying as a mentee in JavaScript. I'll let you know when someone, so now the chatbot itself is going to go reach out to those people who have said, I'm willing to mentor somebody in JavaScript and say, hey, I've got a mentee for you. Would you like to go mentor Carolyn in JavaScript? And he will continue to try to find someone until he's gone through the list of everybody. And if nobody responds, then he'll come back to me and say, I'm sorry, I couldn't find anyone. But if there's nobody who's already said that they're interested in mentoring me or mentoring in JavaScript, he will periodically reach out and say, hey, we've got some people who are interested in learning more about JavaScript. Is this something that you would be willing to mentor someone on? And we're off to the races.
Hey, Carolyn, I have a question.
Yes.
Ironically, but predictably, I would imagine the biggest pushback against the solution would be companies saying, oh, this is just, giving my employees opportunities to do things other than the job that I'm hiring them for, which is absolutely missing the point of your product. But have you heard that feedback? And if not, like, what is the biggest pushback you're getting?
Let's see. I tell you, one of the biggest pushbacks that I've heard so far is just people being nervous about having a chatbot speak with their employees. I had one organization ask me point blank, Carolyn, is this chatbot going to go tell all my employees to go get a job somewhere else? And I thought, okay, clearly I've done a very poor job of explaining the value of this application if that's what people are asking. But I think it really underscores a bigger trend, which is people are just, AI and chatbots in particular kind of get a bad rap sometimes, and they feel that, it's like something out of a movie. Is it going to take over and like 2001 Space Odyssey, lock the doors and not, not let the astronaut back in?
One can only hope.
Don't show them the HAL video, right?
Right. We didn't call him Hal very much on purpose. But I mean, you were talking about what kind of resistance. I honestly haven't heard anybody say things like, "Oh, now people are going to, go do this instead of their job," because it's. I mean, I think that if people leaders, if HR leaders they don't see any value in employees being able to help each other in their job and learn from each other as well, then they probably wouldn't be interested in this product to begin with. And they also, by the way, probably have a really poor work culture, I would imagine, going along with that. If they discourage sharing of knowledge and discourage employees from helping each other.
Right. Well, welcome to the industry in the U.S.
Carolyn, what do you do if you come across a subject or a question that the bot can't answer? I mean, I'm sure like a common question might be like, I'm very unhappy with my manager. They're completely incompetent. but let's say I'm happy with my manager and they, you know, they speak to me in a foreign language other than the one I can understand. I mean, will the bot be able to address or redirect?
So let's play that out. Let's play that out. So let's say that I'm somebody who's really, I feel like the way that my manager is speaking to me is not making me feel appreciated or something like that. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, or they're not, or not incompetent. Let's say they're incompetent, but they give some other reason why they're incompetent that the bot, like, that's like completely foreign.
So in that case, so the scenario I'm playing out is that I want to actually provide anonymous feedback to my manager. So I'm going to provide feedback for someone. You know, the idea would be give someone a chance to change, give someone a chance to, you know, especially if that manager is doing that broadly with many different people, you know, maybe one person saying, you know, I'm not, you know, I don't feel appreciated, or I don't like the way that you speak to me, or something like that, or speak to employees. You know, it could, I'm going to just pick somebody here. You know, maybe one person, it wouldn't make a difference, but with other people, if many people started to give that feedback, that manager's probably going to think, huh, maybe I need to kind of rethink this.
So there's a pattern there. Yeah, I'm just curious to see if I mean, you don't want it to be, I think as the other person suggested, that you don't want it to be like a bitch session, and but that the bot at least can grab some specific data points, so there's something that they can do to try to make a change. I mean, I want it to be an actionable item.
Right. So in this case, you know, I'm saying, I'm giving feedback to my manager saying, hey, I wish that you spoke to employees in a positive way. I don't feel like you appreciate your work teams, or something like that. And of course, I'm going to keep that anonymous. I don't want the person to actually know who provided that feedback. And then the chatbot itself will reach out to that person and say, hey, I've got feedback for you from your team members, and here it is. So
Carolyn, is there an oversight, let's say one step above the manager, who would see that comment as well as in terms of the dashboards of what's going on in a particular unit? Okay.
Perfect segue. No, let me, because we're also running short on time too, I want to make sure you all get to see. So this is the administrative side of the application that's keeping track of all the conversations going on. How are people feeling? What are they talking about? What's important to them? How strongly do they feel about different things? So obviously it's keeping track of employee net promoter score. It's looking at the employee response rate over time. So when the chatbot reaches out, how likely is it that people are responding to it? So it's looking at attempts and successes. And then the suggested activity engine is where you can control what kinds of topics the bot brings up. Do you want to have it offer up mentoring? Some people don't, you know, if you know, maybe there's another system they don't want to use the mentoring. They just, you know, it's as simple as just turning it off. But I think the real power of the system is looking at the metrics page. So it's going to overall track things like net promoter score over time, engagement over time, the employee response rate over time. Has anyone, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the chat. Has anyone used this for exit interviews? You know, it's kind of funny because our philosophy on the whole exit interview thing is, if you've gotten to the point of an exit interview, it's almost too late.
You don't give high scores for the system then.
You know, the whole idea is that the AI figures out what really will make a difference based on the data that it's gathering over time. So it will follow up after a mentoring session. It will follow up and say, hey, Carolyn, did you learn something new? Would you do it again? It will try to figure out what's working. It'll also try to figure that out just from people wanting to respond. So I wanted to show you, this is, again, kind of that heads up. These are the engagement trends that the system is paying attention to, and it's saying, hey, look, you've got some problems here. These are where you want to look. People are not responding well to the questions about diversity or work friendships, professional development or recognition. And as an administrator of the system, I go, oh, wow, okay, our diversity question's really trending poorly. You can click right on that and it will bring up how the diversity data has been trending. You could say, oh, look, back in May, things look pretty good. But then as time went on, gosh, there's an awful lot of red here. You can look at the score over time. And the data sets are really small because this is just my team putting bogus data into the system. This is obviously not real data. So it looks a little contrived here. But I thought what would be interesting is you can see here's some of the recent feedback that people have given on diversity. And it says when people gave the feedback. And of course, a lot of it is anonymous. But then, oh, look, here's somebody, Carolyn, well, it's me, who's given feedback and they actually put their name down to it. And I'm saying, no, people from diverse backgrounds, can get lonely and sad when they're left out. So as an administrator of the system, I can reach out to that person directly from the system and say, oh, hey, Carolyn, I noticed that you're not feeling good about this. Do you want to talk about it? I mean, typically you see when somebody actually does put their name down, it's because they want somebody to reach out to them. So back to the question about, I'm going to click on concerning feedback here. The question that someone asked about, what if someone really feels strongly and is using some pretty strong words around, either suicide or, violence of some sort or something like that. Probably right now, the best thing the system can do is it will recognize the strength of how someone feels and bubble that up to the top of the concerning feedback for either the overall or for a particular category based on where they provided that feedback. So in this case, someone just says, hey, I think we do a terrible job. Okay, terrible is a very strong word. It's bubbling up, it's bubbling up the most concerning feedback to the top of the stack, if you will. I'll just show you one more thing, the community tab, which is looking at the metrics just around building community within the workplace. It will give you, here are the top feedback givers. It'll give you some recent data around who has provided feedback. It'll show you the winners for people of the day, the voters, who's actually voted. And it looks like, you can see who's spent time recognizing the efforts of others and nominations. And then this is the group discussions actually can be really interesting. You can see what are the trends, what are people talking about? Sometimes it can give a really good window into what's concerning people. What are people feeling nervous about? In this case, we're looking at proximity sensors and pressure sensors. That was actually the example that I was giving earlier about the programming of these new IoT devices. And it looks like some other people are very interested in internet safety. You can also see not the latest, but what's been popular. And then what are the topics that are out there that people are searching? People want to talk about project management or health and wellness or yoga, movies, meditation. What are the topics that people haven't yet found members to talk about that they're also trending? So as an administrator of the system, you can kind of see how that's all playing out.
Gotcha. So I'll ask it on Oral's behalf. He said, having an exit survey, using this for exit services survey is allowing people to then get better information that they may not have volunteered while they were employed. What I like about this is the chatbot is impersonal but friendly. I gather this is sitting on the mobile platform, so it doesn't matter. I could do it anytime, and you could keep that data around as people are leaving. Maybe you start seeing some significant trends about why people are leaving. To your point, if you're doing exit surveys, maybe this is not working as well as you'd like it to be. Any other questions from the audience? I've got we can move to the feedback section, but I want to give the group any other last minute questions. If not, okay. So anyone have any feedback they want to give to Carolyn?
Please do. And
Please do. Yeah.
I'd love to hear it. Good, bad, ugly, all is good.
In the absence of that, I'll get it started because I love to always kind of look at the future. So what we're seeing more and more in every cloud vendor is that you're sitting on an array of data across a number of companies. Are your thoughts to take this compendium of data across all your clients and really say, hey, by the way, in the first part of this year, diversity was a hot topic in every company that's using our system. It was at least somewhere on that, low end of, lots of people wanting to ask about it, nothing being necessarily done. As we crossed into the year, it changed, and these became the hotter topics. The influences, you're going to see trends. You're going to see trends across company types, company industries, geographies, whatever it is. I suspect in catching that person's ID or whatever, that being part of your system, do you have access to the HR information on the other side of that? So you just say, hey, it seems like many of the females in this organization are the ones that are asking this question about diversity. And is that a problem? Do you have that kind of access, or do you believe that that's in your roadmap to do that? It's just kind of refining your analysis. It's not necessarily giving away the privacy perspective, but I think it's refining the analysis.
Yeah. So I think what you're talking about, well, there's two things you're talking about. One about trends in the data, and the other is, I think, integration, right? No, you're talking about integration.
Yes.
With existing HCM systems. Yeah, we definitely see that in the future. And honestly, we're simply waiting for the first client who says, please build this integration, and we'll do it. We certainly have that capability.
Cool.
Yeah. And, it's interesting about the trends in the data. So right now, because we have the data to of our existing user base, we use the data from all organizations to tune the data model. So if, for example, even today, like if the chatbot knows that you're interested in negotiation skills, you're probably also interested in things like communication or public speaking. It already knows that, so it gets smarter as more and more data gets sort of fed into the system. Not that it's particularly brilliant, it's still just a bot, but but it does learn based on the all the data that's out there, kind of how to make better suggestions over time as it gets to know what's working.
So I'm going to set you up for, I hope, success. Do you consider pilots? Are you looking for people to raise their hands out of this audience and say, call me, Carolyn?
Absolutely. And I think, you mentioned that there's at least some of the people on the call who are consultants.
Yes.
One of the things we're also doing is building our network of consultants when working with organizations who are trying to get their arms around retention, culture, performance issues. We're more than happy to, create a strategic partnership and make it worth your time by recommending our solution to clients.
Right.
And I mean, through like a revenue share type agreement.
Yeah.
So we're totally open to that.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Well, needless to say, again, thank you very much for the time. Any last minute questions, feedback, or observations from the audience? And if not, I will say thank you all very, very much. As always, I like the crowd's insightfulness and kind of the relevance of what you're showing is what we always look for, and say, okay, does this work for me? Does it work for anybody else I know, and so on. Again, thank you very much, and I think I'll just say to the audience, be prepared. We've got more TRC sessions coming up. I'm going to go off to HR Tech and probably meet a whole bunch more startups. So be prepared. But I appreciate all of your support and your interest in the technology. And Carolyn, thank you very much. I will see you next week.
Okay. Well, thanks to everyone. I really appreciate it. And of course, I'd love to hear from you. All the feedback, good, bad, ugly. It's all welcome.
Please do. All righty. Take care, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.